Life.Church created this podcast because we all need healthy conversations with real people. So this podcast is here to help you start real conversations with your life group, friends, and family. Now, on to the show.
Welcome to the You've Heard It Said podcast. This is Allie.
And this is Jason.
We're actually going to play a game about garbage.
Allie, I bring the games.
Well, not this time, because I brought the game. And anyways, you're going to like this game because you basically argue your way to victory, which is how you play all the games anyway. So I think you're going to really like this.
Okay. All right. Yes. Today we're talking about trash. And you argue. All right. Okay. Let's play.
Anyways, we're going to talk about which one of us has produced the most trash in our lifetimes. So whoever has the least trash wins.
So, wait. How are we possibly going to know who produced more or less trash in our lifetimes?
Exactly. We're not going to know. So that's why you have to have a convincing argument. So whoever has the best argument for why they have less trash wins. But you can't just be like, I have less trash than you, I win. The end. You have to think about it scientifically, mathematically.
Yeah.
You got to give examples too. So.
Okay.
Yeah. So tell me about your trash.
Well, so I think how I'm going to go about this is I'm going to start out by being really honest. You know, look, I've actually made a lot of trash. I'm going to tell you about it.
Okay.
But then I'm going to tell you about why it's not as much as you.
So is that part still going to be true, though? Because you said you're going to start being honest, and then later you're going to talk about...
Okay, so I have 5 kids.
Yep.
All of those kids did not know how to use a toilet for the first couple years of their life. Diapers, okay?
Okay, yeah,
Diapers.
That's fair. Diapers.
Multiple times a day for years, times 5. Plus, I'm married, okay? My wife was a kid.
That was a weird segue.
My wife was a kid, and she didn't know how to use the toilet for 2 years of her life, okay? Same.
Okay, I don't think
same
that
for
affects
me.
your trash.
Same for me also.
I can't wait until she hears it.
I'm just saying we produced a lot of trash, okay? In forms of diapers. I was seeing my whole family. I won't include, but I feel responsible for at least my kids and myself.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
So.
Noted.
Plus, you buy things like granola, and it comes in a box, and you eat the granola, and then you throw the box away, and there's a lot of cereal going around.
Yeah, going around.
Other trash, we try not to use a ton. We actually recycle a lot.
Yep.
We live somewhere that didn't have recycling, and we actually went to the city and we requested to be able to recycle. And they were like, well, actually, we do have this secret hidden recycling program. And the reason that we were prone to do that was because growing up, my mom would always, we recycled my whole life. Okay, so I feel like, I might even be able to claim my parents' recycling as negative trash for myself, maybe. But anyways, well, at least my own, okay? So growing up, recycled my entire childhood. Take that. I'm just saying, did you? You probably didn't. Also, my kids are going to create generation after generation that recycles. So I am pulling trash out of the world. I am a net negative trash.
I don't think that follows necessarily, but all right. So I do eat fast food a lot. I will admit that. And there's a lot of packaging that comes with fast food.
Trash.
Okay. I don't know how to respond to that. But anyways, I do eat a lot of fast food. However, I don't drink soda. I pretty much only drink water, which I drink out of a reusable bottle, or coffee, but that's in a mug. So less trash. I did not recycle growing up, so that's fair. You got me there. But we're really forgetting the big advantage that I have over you.
So we're talking 18 years of not recycling. Okay, go ahead. What's your advantage?
Yeah, but I'm way younger than you, so I have fewer years on the planet to contribute trash to the planet. So.
How about that trash you just contributed? Goodness.
So anyways, less diaper trash as well. So I think
Who won? How do we know?
How about the listeners decide? You can email us at YHIS at Life.Church. You just tell us which one you think won.
Okay.
So we'll find out. But anyways, this all had a point. So the point is that we've been talking about managing our resources all season, but sometimes we don't think about the impact that our resources have on others or the world around us. But every purchase that I make is pretty much voting for the kind of world that I want to live in. So if I purchase things that harm the earth or the people that God made, then I'm on some degree contributing to some injustices.
Yeah. And this topic is really important, but also sometimes I think it can make us feel guilty,
right,
or even overwhelmed to the point where we just tune it out. Like I can't make a difference. There's so much in the world that's, it feels like out of control. And I think especially if we're in a situation where it's already a struggle to make ends meet, then it's like, oh, and I need to purchase this special kind of product or or not, buy this anymore or not shop here anymore. It can be hard.
Right, for sure. And so like we've talked about all season, we don't want to shame you. Healthy conviction is one thing. It's usually about something specific that you can change. But unhealthy shame makes you think that generally everything about you is wrong, So we definitely don't want that.
Right. And we also don't want to gloss over it just because it's difficult.
Yeah.
And so this season, our goal has been to give you a ton of diverse perspectives about how to manage your resources wisely. And we've interviewed people from all stages of life and backgrounds and really all over the place. And we think that all these perspectives can come together to teach us something. And so today, we're going to give you another perspective on this topic all the way from the UK.
Yes, and I'm really excited about it because not only is the interview really great, but she also has a fantastic podcast voice. So our friend Laura recently went to the UK, and while she was there, she got to interview Dr. Ruth Valerio, who is an author, and she's also the Global Advocacy and Influencing Director for Tearfund, and they talked more about this.
I'm here with Dr. Ruth Valerio. Ruth has written extensively on how Christians can pursue justice and care for people and for the environment. Ruth, thank you so much for joining us on the You've Heard It Said podcast.
You're welcome. It's such a privilege to be doing this. Thank you for inviting me.
Of course. Our big question for this episode is, what impact is my money and time making on the world around me? And it really is a big question. Lots of people have lots of opinions when it comes to this subject, and figuring out how to wrap our minds around it can be tricky. So I was wondering, could you first just start out by telling me why we as Christians should be concerned with the impact our money and time have on the world around us? What does the Bible have to say about this subject?
Wow, the Bible has a huge amount to say. I think, firstly, I want to say that we should be interested in these topics because of our basic belief that Jesus is Lord. And that statement isn't primarily about a kind of Jesus is Lord of my heart type thing. But in those days of the early Christians, when that was first said, actually it was a political statement. It was like saying Jesus is prime minister or president or what have you. Jesus is Caesar. The Caesar at that time called himself Lord. So this is saying that Jesus is Lord over everything. Jesus is Lord over the whole of life. And so that's not just about how much we read our Bibles or tell other people about Jesus, as important as those things are, but it means that every area of our life is involved in worshipping God. And so thinking about our money, thinking about how we use our time, those are also really important areas of how we walk with Jesus. When it comes to the Bible, hard to condense it in. There's so much that the Bible says. If we look at the Old Testament, there are two strands that appear regarding money and possessions. On the one hand, there's nothing intrinsically wrong. And in fact, in some parts of the Old Testament, they're part of the promises of God for the people who live according to his ways. And it's important to stress that the Bible is really positive about the material world. We've been put in a world to enjoy it and to enjoy its blessings and the blessings of a generous God. But the Old Testament is also clear that wealth isn't always seen as a reward for faithfulness, and that a person's money or property should never be gained at the expense of another who's thereby left in a poorer state. And the prophets particularly are really strong around denouncing the huge inequality that arose within Israel. If we look at Jesus, we see that actually he talks about money more than anything else other than the kingdom of God. So this was clearly important to him. And he was really clear that you can't serve both God and money, and that money can cause all sorts of problems. More positively, rather than focusing on money, he told us to focus on seeking the kingdom of God. And then the radical economics that we see in Jesus is extended through into the New Testament. In the early church, you think of Acts 2 and 4, and in Paul's letters, particularly just thinking of the church in Corinth, where they were exhorted to be giving money to help those in Jerusalem. And that extended beyond outside of the New Testament into the early church, who were seen as generous and as people. That there was a Caesar who complained that the Christians didn't only help their own kind, they helped everyone too. And he was really annoyed about that. So money is a really important issue when it comes to what it means to be a Christian and how we walk with Jesus.
Yeah, absolutely. So looking at the present day, in what ways does our spending of our time and money impact the world around us? And can you give us some practical examples?
I think when it comes to us spending our money, we have real choices. Are we going to spend our money in ways that help other people and in ways that help take care of the wider world? Or are we going to do it in ways that hinder? So taking it down to the really small thing, when I'm in the supermarket, I may be faced with, let's say, a banana or some coffee, and I may have a choice. There may be a banana or coffee that has come from a fair trade route, or there may be bananas and coffee that haven't. I have a choice. How will I spend my money? If I buy the fair trade banana or the fair trade chocolate or coffee, whatever it is, I'm using my money to support a system that is paying workers well and is enabling them to look after their families and communities and the land that they live on. If I buy something that's not fairly traded, I'm using my money to support a very different and a very harmful system. So, that's a tiny example, but that extends really to every way that we use our money. And it's not only about spending our money, it's also about the money that we keep. So thinking about our investments, thinking about the bank that I use or the pension provider that my money is going into, any investments or savings that I've got. Do I know what those companies are using my money for? If we haven't asked, it may well be that they're using that money to fund all kinds of things that actually I don't want to support. So it's important for me also to be thinking about, where do I invest my money and who do I bank with? So these are big questions.
Yeah. Absolutely. So for people who might not feel as if they have enough money to choose the fair trade coffee over the cheaper kind of coffee, what advice would you give them, especially if they really desire to make these kinds of changes, but don't feel as if, this is something financially they can do right now?
I think it's really important that none of this is about bringing on guilt. To me, I think what's important is not worrying about what we can't do, but focusing instead on what we can do. And it may be that we're in a situation where we're absolutely scraping on the bottom line, and really to do anything differently with our money is pretty nigh impossible. If that's the case, that's fine. God will show you the things that you can do, and it may be that you can focus on your time instead. And there may be areas of your time that you can give and that you can use differently. Or it may be that there's just one change that you can make. So actually switching from conventional coffee to fairly traded coffee It will cost a bit more, but it won't cost a huge amount more. And there was a time when I was living on a really low budget. And literally, I used to stand in the supermarket holding both products in my hands, looking at the price and thinking, "Oh, can I spend more?" And say, I using UK language, say the coffee was £1 more expensive. And I'd ask myself, if I had a farmer in the developing world standing in front of me needing £1, would I give them £1? I thought, yes, of course I would. And so that helped me see it differently. But it may be that we're not in a situation to do that. And that really is fine. This isn't about feeling guilty for what we can't do, but it's about focusing on the things that we can do in a positive way.
So I'm just curious about you personally. How has your understanding of this subject changed over time? And what kind of impact has that had on your life?
I think I've been through a real learning curve around this. I am a child of the consumer age, like anybody else. My culture has taught me that money and possessions are really important. I sometimes think of Jesus' words, you can't serve God and money. Our lives are often a demonstration of us trying to do just that, serve both God and money. So I've had so much to learn from others around me who hold their money, who have an attitude towards money that holds it more lightly than I think I did naturally, and who are more naturally generous than I am, and learning from others who are further ahead of me in terms of those ethical investments and so on. So I am definitely a work unfinished. And we probably all are when it comes to money, because it's such a strong force. But I know I'm learning all the time, and that God is challenging me all the time to hold my money more lightly, not to put so much of my effort into trying to earn more, and to be seeking after his kingdom more. So that has looked like trying to look at ways to be generous. So getting my giving sorted, thinking through how much money do I need to live on, and then can I give away the rest? So rather than going for a kind of tithing thing, if I give 10% and then the rest of it is mine to do with what I want, turning that around a little bit. And there have been times where I've been a bit more generous, and through some money that I've had, I've been able to use that to bless others in a bigger way. So, and looking at my investments, trying to make sure that they are supporting good things. So a whole variety of things, but it's definitely a learning process for me. And I know I'm not there yet.
When was the first time when your interest was sort of captured by this subject, and why this is so important?
Two things come to mind when you ask me that. One is some really good childhood learning. I can remember when I started getting pocket money, who knows how old I was. And my dad, although I've just been saying, let's go beyond tithing, I remember my dad encouraging me to give 10% of that pocket money, and him saying, this is a really important habit. And he said, if you can give 10% of your money now when it's not very much, then that will become a habit. And when you have more money, it'll still be a habit to give 10%. And he was really right. So just getting into that habit where it's a normal and a natural thing to be giving our money. And then the second thing that comes to my mind when you ask me that is some research that I did right at the start of my adult life, when I was research assistant for the head of a big Christian organisation in the UK. And that opened my eyes to how just our regular banks in the UK, high street, mall banks, whatever you would say, but just our regular banks will be supporting the arms trade. And it hit me how much my money was being used to support things that I didn't agree with. So that was a real eye-opener for me. So I would say those two things have been formative.
So I'm wondering, in what ways has your decision to be more mindful of the ways you're spending your time and your money over the course of your life impacted your faith?
That's a good question, because I would say the more obvious direction is that my faith has impacted how I've used my money and my time rather than the other way round. But I think how I use my money and time has impacted my faith because it has encouraged me to have that whole life response to my faith, like where I started right off with this interview, that how I use my money and my time is a part of my faith. So really having that holistic approach and not separating things off to say, well, how I do this is a Christian thing, but how I do that doesn't impact my faith. So I think building that holistic understanding.
Hey friends, it's Audra, and I love when we get to hear from one of our global mission partners like Tearfund. At Life.Church, we're committed to seeing lasting change around the world through our global partners, and that looks like a lot of exciting things. Our newest partner, Living Water International, provided clean water to a community who previously hadn't had access. And even better, the local church was at the center of the action. Because people in the community saw the church meeting the physical needs of its people, 3 people came to know Jesus. And when you give to local and global missions at Life.Church, you're making this kind of restorative work possible. Learn more about our local and global mission partners at www.life.church/missions. Now, back to Dr. Valerio.
It can be easy to go through life with a limited understanding of where the items we're purchasing are coming from or where the trash we produce is going. So for anyone who's curious, if we wanted to learn more about these kinds of things, where should we start?
So I've got all kinds of articles on my website. On there, some biblical, theological stuff to help you as you think these things through. And then also a section called Green Living that's got lots of different articles about different things. And then also one of my books is called L is for Lifestyle, Christian Living That Doesn't Cost the Earth. And it's very easy read. It goes through the alphabet, takes an issue for each letter, very short chapter with some information there, and then 2 or 3 clear action points. So that book really is probably the best place to start for people to gain an understanding around these things. Another place I would suggest it's a magazine, but it has a website. So it's called The Ethical Consumer magazine. I used to get that in paper form for a long while, and I don't anymore, but it has a really good website that you can have a look at. And quite a lot of this is around what I call developing an ethical nose or an ethical instinct. So as you started by saying, these things can be complicated, and to know the ins and outs of computers and washing machines and bananas and pensions and some of those things. Oh my goodness, I couldn't give you the details on everything. But over time, as you read things and chat with people, you begin to develop just a bit of an instinct, and you can pick up, you can kind of tell, well, this is probably going to be better than that. So starting with some basic things like L is for Lifestyle will help you develop that ethical instinct.
So if we wanted to take steps toward being more responsible with our time and money, what are some good first steps you would recommend? So how do we make this process seem achievable instead of overwhelming?
Yeah. So let me start with money. I would say begin with a budget. So work out a budget so that you know exactly what your money's doing. Because if you don't have a budget, you may not know, and you might not know what you're spending and how much you're earning and so on. So begin by working out a budget so that you know exactly what your money's doing. Then I would recommend you get together with a mature Christian friend and go through your budget with them. That can be really countercultural because we don't like talking about our money with other people. But in a safe faith discipleship context, I think that's a really helpful thing to do. And then think through what is one thing that you could do to use your money to help others? It may be looking at your bank. It may be saying, okay, next time I'm in the supermarket, if there's an ethical alternative, I'll get that, and that will become a regular thing. But choose one thing that you can do. Then when it comes to our time, it's important to think through what values in our lives our time represents. And are we living out God's values through how we spend our time? If not, what needs to change? So for me, fundamental to the gospel is an understanding of relationships, that we've been created to be in relationship with God, relationship with others, relationship with the wider natural world, and relationship with ourselves. And with those 4 different areas, I would think through, how does your time reflect that? Are you spending time with God? Are you spending time with other people, developing your relationships? Are you getting outside and spending time in the wider natural world? And finally, are you spending time being kind to yourself, looking after yourself and having space for yourself as well? So those are some areas I would encourage us to think about.
You know, I really like that a central theme for this season has been embracing all parts of our lives as spiritual. Worship is this whole life response to the gospel, to living and loving like Jesus. And so the way we use our resources and where our resources are going can all be ways that we worship God.
Yeah, I really love how Dr. Valerio brought us back to the beginning. So she talked about how God created us in his image, and then he chose us to partner with him to rule over the earth. And so with that comes a great responsibility of ruling over it well. And I don't really often think about that when I make purchases, but it really is true that every resource I consume is either contributing to flourishing of the world around me or to some degree some injustices in the world around me.
Which is a big thing to think about.
Right.
And I think it's also important to acknowledge what she pointed out, that the world is good. Like, God so loved the world that he sent his son. He created us in the image of God, and he called us good. And yes, sin enters the world and breaks it. And we also understand that God has entrusted us to help restore things, to care for his good world. And it changes how we might treat it when we think about it that way.
Yeah, for sure. And this is a topic that I've really been on a journey with the past couple of years. And so I loved that Dr. Valerio provided a simple on-ramp to get started, because it feels really overwhelming, especially when the sustainable choice is often inaccessible for many people, or inconvenient, or more expensive. And so just having the action step of picking one way to change feels way more empowering. And I can think of a few changes I've made through the past couple of years that have actually ended up saving me money and contributed to a better world.
Yeah, so I just wanted to point out 2 things. One is that your journey started in the last couple of years.
Okay.
So like trash, you making more trash. Okay, but seriously, I want to know, like, what are the things? What are a couple of things?
Yeah, so a couple of them I mentioned earlier, like I don't buy plastic water bottles and I rarely use them. I also switched cleaning products. So I have like a glass cleaning bottle, and then I have this natural brand that has like 3 ingredients. So it kind of started out a little bit more expensive, but now that I've used it for a while, when you calculate it, it actually saves me way more money, and I use fewer bottles.
Oh, so like it's a budget thing too.
It is a budget thing.
That's cool.
It was helpful. And so for clothing, I've also started buying from sustainable stores instead of just choosing fast fashion, which I held off on the longest time, because you always hear people say like, it's way cheaper, but then you look at the price and you're like, no, it's not. Like, are we looking at the same thing? But I did this little experiment where I was like, okay, I'm not going to buy any clothes for like 6 months.
Okay.
And then at the end of it, I had enough money to actually buy the thing that I wanted. And now that I've bought something from a more sustainable place, I really like it, and it's held up a lot more. So over time, it really does counterbalance.
You keep it longer. Yeah.
Right.
When you said fast fashion, I think I know what you mean, but are you saying like it's like super cheap stuff?
You know, if I'm buying something that's like ridiculously cheap, it's like, well, how did they do this? Like they must be skimping along the way where it adversely affects someone else.
If it's too good to be true? It's too good to be true.
Too good to be true. Yes.
Okay.
And then there's even one that I'm not great at yet, but one thing that I'm working on is picking a day of the week where I just don't buy anything.
Okay.
Like no Amazon packages, just nothing. So I haven't fully arrived, but I want to do that just to give the world a break for like a day.
Sounds very Sabbathy.
Right.
So a few things that I'm thinking about it right now as you're talking that our family does. One is we actually buy a ton of our stuff in our house from thrift stores.
Yeah.
And so, it's possible that some of the stuff that we bought was not super sustainable or whatever the first time when it was made. Yeah. But because we're buying it, it's not going to a dump.
Right.
And we're also spending less money. It's kind of cool how like sometimes you can make a choice that affects all these areas of your life.
And I mean, again, all of this isn't to like be snobby or to like make you feel badly if you don't purchase everything sustainably made or like whatever, like I think that's why it's so important what she said about like pick one way that feels empowering and possible for you that you can honor God and just think about it more intentionally.
Yeah. We wanted to buy a couch for our family. Like we have not enough room on our couch for all 7 of us. And so we start looking online and then all of a sudden, like Instagram's like, you want to buy this couch and this couch, you start seeing the ads everywhere.
Yes.
And then I was convinced I'd found the perfect couch. I'm about to buy the couch and I just couldn't do it. And so you have to buy the couch by like midnight to save all this money and all this stuff. So next morning,
I hate those. I'm a sucker for it.
Next morning, we wake up. My wife's like, do you buy the couch? I was like, no, we're still used couch people. And for some reason, when I said that, it actually felt really comforting to like, yeah, you know what? That's who we are. We are people who don't have to do it that way. Now, that doesn't mean everybody needs to buy a used couch.
Right.
But what's the one thing? For us, it was a couch. What is it for you?
Yeah, I like that. And so we're going to link to Dr. Valerio's resources and more in the conversation guide in case you want to go even more in depth into the topic. But a big question that you can talk about with people in your life group or your friends or your family this week is, what impact are my resources having on the world around me? And what's one change I could make so that my time and my money contribute to flourishing in the world around me? We hope you've enjoyed today's episode of You've Heard It Said, and we hope that what you heard inspired you to reach out to a friend or your life group to talk about it. We even have a conversation guide in the show notes to get you started. Also, if you enjoyed today's stories, you can also be a part of helping us find more. If you have or know of a great story we should share on the podcast, you can send it to us anytime at www.life.church/mystory. Also, you'd get an air high five from us if you took a second to leave a rating and review. What's an air high five? Basically, it's better and less germy than a real one. It's me telling you right now that you're awesome because you are. So thanks for being awesome, and thanks for your review. It really does help more people find the podcast. Have a great week.